All right, guys, this should be Tuesday. You should have done this yesterday, Intro to Graphic Design Notes, and today we're on two types of graphic notes, and so we're taking it a step further than what you learned yesterday. You do need to have this note guide pulled up, following along with us as I go through the PowerPoint. All right, so make sure that you have your note guide pulled up, and we are moving along. So when we talk about graphic design, we're talking about pictures or images, and that's just one of the things in graphic design. But to specifically talk about images, there are going to be two different types of graphics, and they can be raster or they can be vector. And here's a really good example of the two differences in the picture, and we're going to break it down further. So when we talk about raster images, these can also be called bitmap. These are going to be images, and you can see down here in the left-hand corner that are actually more pixelated. They are kind of made out of a grid of colors, and you'll see that right next to the image in the middle. That's kind of what a color might look like, or what the image shape might take in a raster image. And it often has like maybe blurry edges, but it also has gradual color shifts. And so as we go through, you'll see kind of the pros and cons of the two different ones. But a raster one, just remember, is the one made up of tiny squares of different colors. And then you have a vector image, okay? And so these are images who use mathematical formulas to actually come up with their colors, and so they define a beginning and an end point that connects them, and you can see that in that middle image again. This is going to be solid color changes, so you're going to drastically change to a different color instead of maybe like they're a little bit more mixed, and they're going to have clean lines with clear edges, whereas in the raster image it was kind of blurry. These are going to be sharp looking, okay? So when we talk about raster graphics, you've got pros and cons with anything, right? But when we're talking about raster, so these are going to be that the color information is stored by coding individual square pixels, which is what I just said. They're little, you saw the little tiny squares. Each square gets its own code for a color, so that's why you can have more colors in a raster. And so the pros are going to be it's high quality with lots of detail, right? So look at the image on the right. You've got lots of color, lots of small orange and green and blues, and you see all kinds of different little details in there. It says an image like the one that you're looking at could have millions of individual pixels, and so that's why it's a raster image. And it another pro is that it allows for precise color editing, so I'm able to take that and mold it into more of what I want it to be when it's a raster image. And so the con is, so since the picture is made up of individual little pixels, it actually makes the file larger. So it's got a lot of data within it is what this con is saying. And so sometimes that can make the image really large. And often these pictures can't be resized without getting a loss of quality. So it might get a little bit blurry or a lot blurry or whatever. You can't really mess with them too much since they're so large. Most common type of a raster image is actually just a normal photograph. And the most common editor that a graphic designer would use is Adobe Photoshop. Excuse me, guys, I'm really stumbling over my words. Okay, so when we talk about raster file types, these are the common ones, okay? So you've got GIFs, and you know what GIFs are. They allow for animation, so they move, and they're great for logos and illustrations. And so you can see over here the different raster file types over to the right, what each different one would make a picture look like. And when we say file type, that just means I went file, save as, and I saved it as something different. So you can see those over to the right. You also have JPEG, which is very normal. That's what a lot of pictures are, is a JPEG. And so these are generally produced through digital photography. And again, like I just said, these are most common. This is what you're going to see a lot, is that it's a JPEG. And then you have a TIFF, and then this is a common page layout file type, which would mean print layout, page layout, meaning that you would use it like in a newspaper or a magazine. And it says high quality with lots of data. So these files are huge, and they're used primarily for printing. So like I said, hard copy things. And then you can have a BMP, which is a bitmap. But this is developed by Microsoft, and so it's very rarely used other than people at Microsoft, and so it defines each pixel in the image. So that means each individual color is defined, which gives it a high quality, but the file size is huge. And then you have a PNG, and also these are super common as well. Where it says the second bullet, used extensively for online images. So if I've ever had you go to Google and save an image, a lot of times they'll come out PNG because you brought them from online. So they have good image quality and a small file size. And then you could have a PSD, which is Photoshop's very own format to save a picture as. And this is going to be the format used most by graphic design professionals. Okay, and so switching from raster to vector, this is, again, we're using lines and shapes and all different kind of curves to make an image. So it's not like raster in the sense of you can kind of have more color. These are going to be very defined. So you're going to use vector images mostly on billboards, posters, and things like that. And so in the pros, you can see that it says these are way easy to increase and decrease in size because due to the shapes, you can modify them without losing any of the quality or resolution in the photo. That's a pro. Whereas with the raster, if we make it smaller or bigger, right, you could lose quality in the image. And another pro is, since it has less information to store, there's not as much going on there and not as much color, the file size will be smaller. And individual areas of color can be edited separately due to them being kind of defined lines and defined areas. And the cons are using areas of colors means the images lack small details. So you can tell, let's take the lion for instance, looking at its face, you tell it's a lion, but it is not as clear cut as it would be if it was a photo of a lion. You wouldn't see the colors on its fur around its face, and you just lose the detail. And these must be created by a graphic artist. And so the most common type is going to be your logos and fonts, and then the most common editor is Adobe Illustrator. Okay, and these are going to be the vector file types that you can have. And again, you have Adobe Illustrator, which is going to be Adobe's very own file format for vector images. You can have an EPS, which is commonly used to transfer the image between two operating systems. So if I was moving it from a Mac to a PC, and that's going to include embedded bitmap version for image previewing on any device. And then you can have an EMF, which is also, again, developed by Microsoft and used by Windows only for printing. And that can have both bitmaps and vectors, which means it can be a raster or a vector. PDF, you guys should know what a PDF is. This is the document format. And so this actually creates an electronic image that it creates an electronic image that includes all of the elements in a printed document. Graphic elements take up little space and can be displayed by all devices. PDFs are super common. SVG, this is going to be images that can be displayed in a web browser, and these can be both opened by image and text editor, so you can edit them in both image and text. And then you have a CDR, and this is CorelDRAW's own file format, and so you wouldn't really use those, and that just allows for special effects to be preserved after editing. Okay, and so on your note guide, you're going to have these questions. And so you'll see my little dancing banana here. And the question is, which file format would be best to use when saving the image to the right? So you need to go back to see what the different file types are. And the answer should be fairly clear to you all. You should be very familiar with this specific file type. And then your second question is, would it be better to save the image to the left as a raster or a vector file? And so really think about what you see here. If it's blurry, if it's sharp, and which quality goes with which file. So kind of think about that. Answer the questions on your note guide. I'll go back to this one so that you can see it again. Which file format would be best? And is it better to save the file as a raster or a vector? Go back to the PowerPoint if you need more information. When you're done, submit it to Google Classroom.